Welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be talking about the euro and why I think that the euro is coming near its end. Now, I also think this for the dollar, but I want to keep it focused on the euro. I want to talk a lot about the eurozone. I want to talk a lot about monetary policy and why I think it is inevitable just with, well, basically all currencies that are out there, that the euro is going to collapse. So, are you ready? Let's go. So let's just dive straight in. The ECB prepares a new tool to tackle rising borrowing costs in weaker economies, and this is what they've announced last Tuesday in their surprise policy meeting. But in my opinion, it was more of an emergency policy meeting, and I'm going to explain in a minute why it is an emergency. So what is this tool that this article is talking about, and what is this tool that the central banks are talking about? Well, nobody really knows as of yet what it is. I think they are going to introduce it in a month. But this new tool is, they call it an anti-fragmentation tool. It's a really fancy word for just saying, okay, the Southern European countries are in trouble and the interest rates are going up. They have a lot of debt and they can service that debt if interest rates go up. So we're going to buy their bonds. We're going to buy their debt, which means that interest rates go down, right? If you remember my video about the relationship between the price of a bond and its yield, then you will remember that if the price of a bond goes up, because the central bank is buying that bond, then the interest rates or the yields have to go down. And this is sort of, this new tool. I mean, it's not really a new tool. It's something they have been doing since basically the global financial crisis, but okay. But it's this new tool to basically make sure that the Italian government, that the Greece government, that, the Portuguese government can service their debt. And this is also what is stated right here in this article, or it's a press release actually by the ECB. It says, based on this assessment, the Governing Council decided that it will apply flexibility in reinvesting redemptions coming due in the PEP portfolio. Now, the PEP portfolio, of course, the Pandemic Emergency Purchase Program, it's a mouthful of words, but that's basically QE, or quantitative easing, they did after the pandemic. And of course, that is now rolling over, or that is now ending, that program. And if you, as a central bank, buy government bonds from a country, of course, some of those bonds or some of those notes eventually mature. And when they mature, countries and investors need to pay that back to the central bank. And of course, that is this redemption, what they're talking about, they get this revenue from the maturity, from this maturing bonds. Now, what are they going to do? Like I've discussed before, they're going to use those proceeds, they're going to use those revenues to buy more Italian, more Greece, more, Portuguese, more Spanish government bonds in the future. Now, Isabel Schnabel, she's a member of the ECB's executive board. She said in Paris on Tuesday, our commitment to the euro is our anti-fragmentation tool. This is what I've said before. This commitment has no limits, and our track record of stepping in when needed backs up this commitment. Now, this reminds me a lot of something that a very famous person said in 2012. Listen to this.
Within our mandate, the ECB is ready to do whatever it takes to preserve the euro. And believe me, it will be enough.
So indeed, Mario Draghi also in 2012 said whatever it takes. And this is very similar to what this Isabel Schnabel, I don't know her by the way, but it's very similar to what she says. And it kind of gives me the feeling that maybe they're trying to get the same reaction out of the market. Because what happened in 2012, and let me show you over here, and that will become very clear. Here in 2012, it was in July of 2012 when he gave that speech, you see that the yield on Italian government bonds decreased massively. And this is exactly what they wanted. So they didn't even do anything, but just him saying that, him saying that we will do whatever it takes to preserve the euro, and trust me, it will be enough, that on its own reduced the yield on the Italian government bonds and raised the prices, of course, on those bonds. But this chart exactly shows the problem and exactly the reason why that surprise policy meeting was being held. Because indeed, Mario Draghi, only with that speech, caused the 10-year bond yields of Italy to massively decrease. But at the moment, these yields are rising very fast. Why? Well, because the central banks are tightening their monetary policy. They're raising interest rates, they're doing quantitative, or they're even talking about quantitative tightening, but at least they're stopping quantitative easing. And that is exactly the reason why interest rates are going up. Now, this is a problem, and of course the European Central Bank also knows this. Why is this a problem? Well, let me show you with another chart. So this is the chart of Italian government debt. Now, Italian government debt is very high and it increased a lot over the years. Let's look at a chart of GDP from Italy. Well, GDP hasn't really grown that significantly, at least not as fast as the government debt of Italy. So let's now look at debt to GDP ratio. Well, Italy is actually number 2. Italy has the second spot in the list of national debt to GDP ratio. Of course, Greece is number 1. Greece hasn't had the best reputation, I must say, in terms of paying back their debt. We actually had to bail them out during the European sovereign debt crisis. But this shows you Italy has a national debt to GDP of 155%. And this is actually outdated, so it might even be higher at the moment. Now, the problem is, of course, that, and this also holds for Greece and for Portugal, right, and for Spain, that if interest rates go up, and that is what is going on right now, interest rates are spiking up, as you could see in that chart. It becomes very, very expensive to service your debt costs. So if you're going to issue new bonds, if you're going to issue new debt as a government, it becomes very expensive to pay back the interest. And that will ultimately lead to higher budget deficits. It will lead to even more debt. And yeah, it's sort of a Ponzi scheme. You're issuing new debt to pay back old debt. Same, by the way, holds for the US. And that's just not sustainable. So that's why the ECB is now stepping in and saying, hey, we are going to do whatever it takes in the same line as Mario Draghi in 2012. We are going to do whatever it takes to basically don't let you default on your debt, because that is what is going to happen. If the ECB doesn't step in here, then I personally think that countries like Greece, countries like Italy are going to default on their debt. And that's, of course, not something that we want. And what is now going to happen? Because you're probably wondering, well, what effect does this have on me? And I personally think that the effect it has on you is even more inflation. Let me explain. You see, the only thing the ECB can do right now is create more inflation. The only thing they can do is buy even more government bonds, do even more quantitative easing to suppress interest rates. And I think that this is not only going to happen for these southern European countries, right? I also think this is going to happen for northern European countries like Germany, like the Netherlands, like Belgium, like France. And it will eventually end up in even more inflation. And I think we already have too much inflation, let's be honest. We have way too much inflation. So we might even get hyperinflation. I mean, hey, that's really not something I think is a weird scenario. I think that is even quite likely that that's going to happen. So I am very worried about the future, and I think you should prepare yourself for such scenarios. But let's get back a bit here, because what is the true root of this problem? Why are these countries, right, these southern European countries, why do they have so much debt? And the reason is monetary policy. You see, record low interest rates since the global financial crisis and quantitative easing has caused these countries to borrow a lot of money against a very low interest rate. So they didn't really care, right? And this is always the argument why people think that Greece and why people think that Italy are not going to go into recession or are not going to default on their debt, they say, well, the economy is growing and interest rates are really low. But what is going on now? The economy worldwide is going into recession and interest rates are rising. So the exact opposite of what these people are saying. And this is a really big problem. And these record low interest rates are the true cause of all of this. Because if interest rates weren't this low for such a long time, the Italian government or the Greek government or the Spanish government would be disciplined not to spend that much money. But hey, they did because of these record low interest rates. And I think that this is the true root of this problem. But hey, look at all these debt to GDP ratios in this chart here. I mean, you can already imagine that this is just simply unsustainable. I mean, these countries are really going to collapse if interest rates go really high, at least sufficiently high to tackle this inflation problem we have. But hey, let's imagine that, okay, interest rates are going really high. That would probably mean that a lot of countries are going to default on their debt. Now, who is going to bail them out this time? I mean, no one. No one is going to bail them out this time because the magnitude of this major domino default of all these countries would be so large that even if taxpayer money would be used, I truly think we still wouldn't get enough money raised by taxes. I truly think that. So in that sense, that's not possible. What is the other option? Well, we can just print the money out of thin air and in that sense monetize the debt, right? Inflate basically their debt away. That's also possible. Now, initially you can think about that and think, well, that's not going to happen. I mean, inflation is so extremely high. If they would do that, they would create even more inflation, and then we would go into hyperinflation. The entire Eurozone would go into hyperinflation. Well, indeed, that is probably what is going to happen, but I think that is the most likely scenario, to be honest. I think that when the economy goes into a recession, not only in these countries, but I think in the entire Eurozone, also in the US, and interest rates are going up, then I think they're going to reverse course, and I think they're going to lower interest rates anyways, to be honest. I mean, regardless of these countries, I think they're going to reverse course anyways. I think they're going to do quantitative easing anyways again. I mean, we're really in for a bad roller coaster ride. But the last option, which I think could also happen, is that the Eurozone breaks in half. So we get sort of like this northern part of the Eurozone and the southern part, where the northern part maybe still uses the euro, or maybe an alternative version of the euro, and the southern part actually uses, I don't know, maybe the southern euro, or maybe they go back to their local currencies they used to have before the euro got introduced. That's also possible. But yeah, I mean, either way, in all the scenarios, it's not going to end well, especially for those countries that are going to break in the south of Europe. And eventually, and I hear people saying that there will be some kind of great reset, or maybe central bank digital currencies play a part here. But I think regardless of what is going to happen, inflation will be very, very high in the near future. I think this will be the largest inflationary decade, or I should correct myself, stagflationary decade we have ever seen. And I think it will be a recession. It could as well be a very, very severe depression, to be honest. But that's it for today. Please let me know, first of all, what you think that that policy tool is going to be. Maybe you guys have more information than I do. But also let me know what you think about the future of the euro, the future of the dollar, maybe some other currencies that you are interested in. Yeah, let me know what you think about it. And thank you for listening. Please don't forget to like, comment or subscribe. And I will see you in the next video. Bye bye.